It always starts the same way. Warm texts, constant compliments, a flood of attention that feels too good to question. He says you're unique, special. He tells you he's never met anyone like you. He paints the future like a dream. Plans, promises, a picture-perfect life, and you believe him. But then, slowly, subtly, almost imperceptibly, something shifts. Every disagreement becomes an accusation. Every question you ask is met with guilt. Every conversation feels like standing trial. You're always the one being judged. You wonder, am I the problem? Did I overreact? Why do I always feel guilty when I speak my truth? Meanwhile, he stands there, calm, polished, in control. That well-practiced smile, that chilling air of superiority, that rehearsed empathy, so flawless it feels fake. Because it is. If any of this feels familiar, it's not just coincidence. It's a pattern. And it has a name. You may know someone like this. The friend who always has to be admired. The coworker who never takes responsibility. The charming partner who made you feel seen. Then made you doubt your sanity. Or maybe you're still under their spell, wondering why you feel so small in the presence of someone who once made you feel so valued. That person is likely a narcissist. And here's what makes narcissism so dangerous. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't attack with force. It seduces. It smiles. It adapts to your vulnerabilities. And once it knows your weak points, it slowly poisons them. The narcissist manipulates you long before you realize a game is being played. By the time you feel something is off, they've already rewritten the story. You're the villain, they're the victim, and you believe it. But to truly understand this destructive force, we must look deeper, beyond modern labels, back to where it all began. The term narcissism comes from Greek mythology. Narcissus, a young man so captivated by his own reflection that he couldn't pull away. He stared endlessly into the water until his body withered, and he died. A victim of self-obsession, Freud turned that myth into diagnosis, but it was Carl Jung who took it further. Jung saw narcissism not merely as excessive vanity, but as a profound spiritual disease. He warned of the narcissistic shadow, a hidden force in the psyche that refuses introspection, a shadow that projects its flaws onto others, unwilling to face the truth within. Because narcissism isn't just ego, it's a defense mechanism for a deeply fragile ego terrified of collapse. It demands admiration, feeds on control, thrives on emotional dominance, and disguises all of this as affection. And the most terrifying part? Narcissists blend in. They appear helpful, charming, even empathetic, until you're too deep to escape without damage. By the time you see the cracks, your self-worth is already crumbling. That's why this video is more than analysis. It's a warning, a message to you. If you've ever felt confused around someone who seems too perfect, too confident, but leaves you doubting yourself after every interaction. If you've ever felt like you give everything, yet it's never enough. If you feel like you're walking on eggshells, constantly trying to avoid the next eruption, this isn't just a difficult relationship. This is a psychological trap. Today, we'll expose what was once invisible. We'll examine narcissism through the lens of Jungian depth psychology, not to label others, but to understand yourself and liberate your mind. You'll learn how narcissists manipulate, how they distort your perception, and most importantly, how to resist them and reclaim your autonomy. Because the first defense against a narcissist is recognition. And recognition demands that you dare to look behind the mask. To truly understand the modern narcissist, we must travel backward, not just to Freud, not even to Jung, but further still to a time before psychology had names for these patterns, back to ancient Greece, where myths weren't entertainment, they were mirrors of the soul. The myth of Narcissus is more than a poetic tragedy. It is a psychological map, a symbolic warning about what happens when a human being becomes imprisoned by their own reflection. Narcissus was a young man of extraordinary beauty. Everyone who saw him desired him, but he rejected them all. Cold, aloof, untouched by affection. One day, walking through a forest, he came upon a still lake and saw his own face reflected in the water. He had never seen anything so captivating. He leaned closer, and he stayed, unable to pull away. He became consumed by a solitary obsession with his image. He died there, not from an outside force, but from his own self-fascination. A life lost not to violence, but to disconnection from reality. From the place where he died, a flower bloomed. The daffodil, a symbol of his name and of the deadly beauty of illusion. But here's what most people misunderstand. Narcissus didn't truly love himself. He loved the image of himself. What he adored was not his soul, but a reflection, an illusion. And that is the heart of narcissism. The narcissist is not someone with too much self-love. They are someone who has constructed a false self, an idealized mask designed to cover a deep, gnawing void of self-rejection. An inflated ego on the surface, but underneath, a soul disconnected and hollow. A dazzling facade built over an abyss. Freud was the first to transform this myth into diagnosis. He saw narcissism as a phase, a normal step in early development, but also a dangerous fixation when not outgrown. But it was Carl Jung who went further. Jung connected narcissism to the shadow, that rejected, unconscious part of the self that the ego refuses to integrate. The narcissist, Jung said, is at war with their shadow, but instead of facing it, they project it. They blame others for the flaws they refuse to see in themselves. They accuse to avoid introspection. They manipulate to preserve their fragile illusion of control. And so, the modern narcissist doesn't drown in water. They drown in the obsession with dominance, in their fear of being irrelevant, in their compulsive need to be admired but never truly seen. They build their world as a stage, with themselves at the center and everyone else orbiting like props, until inevitably everything collapses. But what about you? Have you ever lived with someone like this? Have you ever felt like no matter what you do, it's never enough? Like you're constantly trying to earn affection that always moves further away? Have you noticed that certain people drain you? That being near them leaves you guilty, anxious, exhausted? Then brace yourself, because now that we've uncovered the origin of narcissism, it's time to look at its expression, how it shows up, how it enters your life unnoticed. In the next part, we'll explore the first red flag, the narcissist's seductive charm, and why it's so dangerous, because the poison often begins with a smile. If this resonates with you, click the subscribe button and support this channel. Your awareness is your first shield. Let's begin. And it is precisely in this phase, the seductive phase, that he conquers you, not through force, but through overwhelming affection. He becomes indispensable overnight. He creates an emotional bond so quick, so intense, so intoxicating that it bypasses your natural defenses. In psychology, this is known as love bombing, An avalanche of compliments, attention, and validation. It doesn't feel like manipulation. It feels like destiny. You let your guard down. You begin to trust. You start to believe. You surrender. But what appears to be deep connection is actually a calculated strategy. What seems like love is covert control. Carl Jung warned us clearly. Everything that is excessively idealized carries within it the seed of destruction. And here, that warning plays out in full force. The narcissist doesn't love you. He loves the image he's created, not only of himself, but of you too. You are not a person to him. You are a mirror, a mask. The moment you display flaws, vulnerability, emotional needs, you have violated the fantasy. You've shattered the illusion that was never meant to reflect truth, only to serve his fragile ego. That's when the script changes. The charm that captivated you was just bait. He never wanted your soul. He wanted your adoration. And now he's no longer enchanted. He's irritated. He begins to pull away. The same smile that once made you feel chosen now feels like a warning. Cold, controlled, conditional. This is only the beginning, because the real destruction begins after the seduction phase ends. In the next part, we will enter the core of the nightmare, the infamous cycle of idealization, devaluation, and discard. A pattern so predictable, yet so emotionally devastating that it leaves the victim questioning their own sanity. After the magic comes the chaos. If the narcissist won you over with affection, promises, and intense presence, it was never about love. It was about setting the stage for the real prize, control. And this control isn't loud. It's subtle, silent, systematic. It unfolds in 3 stages. First, idealization. He puts you on a pedestal. You're praised constantly, treated like royalty. You're told you're his soulmate, the only person who ever understood him. Every message from you is celebrated. Every meeting is magical. You feel seen. You feel chosen. You feel like you've finally found something real, but you haven't. Because none of this was about you. It was his fantasy being projected onto you. You weren't being loved. You were being used as a prop to fulfill a script he wrote long before you ever arrived. Then it shifts quietly, but powerfully. Second phase, devaluation. He begins to chip away at your confidence. It starts small. Little jabs disguised as jokes. Backhanded compliments. Subtle comparisons to others. He offers advice that leaves you second-guessing yourself. You begin to feel like you're walking on eggshells. You feel like you're always doing something wrong, but you don't know what. You try harder. You give more. You begin to shrink, but nothing brings back that first version of him because it was never real. What changed isn't you. What changed is that the illusion no longer serves him. And finally comes the most brutal part, discard. He pulls away, emotionally first, then maybe physically. He becomes cold, indifferent, absent. Sometimes it ends suddenly. Other times he provokes you until you end it, so he can paint himself as the victim. And often, by then, he already has someone else lined up. Someone new to idealize, someone unaware of the mask that's about to slip. And you? You're left with confusion, guilt, self-doubt that corrodes your perception. What did I do wrong? The answer is nothing. Carl Jung reminds us, what we refuse to face in ourselves, we will project onto others. The narcissist cannot accept his flaws, his insecurities, his rejections, so he throws them onto you. He weaponizes your humanity to avoid his own. But once you see this, once the cycle becomes clear, you are no longer blind to it. It is a pathological defense mechanism sustained not by direct aggression, but by emotional manipulation and the slow surgical destruction of your psyche. And the most dangerous part, this cycle doesn't happen just once. It repeats again and again. They return, apologize, swear they've changed, promise you the future they once painted, a future you still secretly long for. And you, already vulnerable, already fragmented, believe them. Each return deepens the dependency. Each promise tightens the chain. You begin to doubt your own perception, question your own sanity, and little by little you stop trusting yourself. It's not a visible prison. There are no bars, only guilt, confusion, and the paralyzing fear that maybe, just maybe, you are the problem. So ask yourself, are you inside this cycle? If you feel lost in your own mind, it's time to pierce the fog. It's time to see clearly what lies behind the illusion, because at the core of all this pain is one thing: emotional manipulation. In the next part, we will reveal how the narcissist distorts reality, rewrites history, and makes you carry the weight of a guilt that was never yours. Have you ever felt guilty for something you know, deep down, you didn't do? Have you ever apologized without understanding why? Have you tried to fix a situation that they created, yet somehow convinced you was your fault? If yes, then you've already been manipulated by a narcissist, perhaps without even realizing it. This is the most insidious part of their behavior. They don't dominate by screaming. They dominate by distorting your perception. They blur the lines between truth and fiction. They gaslight you, slowly, quietly, strategically, until you begin to lose trust in your own mind. They are masters of psychological warfare. They study your vulnerabilities. They learn what hurts you, what frightens you, what you're ashamed of. And they weaponize it. Carl Jung once said, "What we do not confront in ourselves, we will meet as fate." But the narcissist does not confront anything. They refuse to introspect, to admit fault, to own their shadows. So what do? They project. They offload their guilt, their rage, their shame, all the parts of themselves they cannot accept, onto you. You become their emotional scapegoat, their mirror, their target. And this projection doesn't come alone. It's accompanied by a full arsenal of manipulation tactics, each one designed to erode your defenses and keep you submissive, confused, and emotionally depleted. One of the most dangerous is gaslighting, a term born from a play in which a man dims the lights in the house and convinces his wife she's imagining things, not to drive her mad, but to make her question her reality. The narcissist does the same. They deny conversations you clearly remember. They twist your words, minimize your emotions, and mock your reactions. If you cry, you're dramatic. If you pull away, you're cold. If you defend yourself, you're crazy. And over time, you begin to believe it. You stop trusting your memory. You second-guess your emotions. You abandon your boundaries just to avoid conflict. And that's exactly when they tighten the grip. Another cruel weapon is triangulation. They bring in third parties, real or imagined, to destabilize you. An example, a friend, a coworker. They casually compare you, suggesting that others are more attractive, more understanding, more desirable. And you, already emotionally drained, start competing for attention that was once freely given. You try to earn back what was always meant to be unconditional. Then comes the guilt. Once you see clearly, they lose control. Once you name the pattern, you reclaim your strength. And in the next and final part, You will learn how to spot these personalities before they enter your life and how to cut the cord if one already has. Because healing is not just about recovery. It is also about prevention. It is about becoming so whole that no one can convince you to betray yourself again. Because understanding a narcissist is only the beginning. True freedom begins when you finally break the bond. The narcissist doesn't show up with a warning. He doesn't announce, "I'm here to destroy you." He walks in with warmth, with tenderness, with charm. He says all the right things. He seems safe, even healing. And that's precisely what makes him so dangerous. He doesn't come as a threat. He comes disguised as your salvation. That's why the first way to protect yourself is to learn to see what once seemed invisible. It's developing a kind of inner radar, a clinical eye for patterns that betray the truth behind the mask. Narcissists cannot tolerate frustration. They collapse under contradiction. They react to discomfort with rage, with cold indifference, or with the most insidious weapon of all, punitive silence. They do not take criticism, not even the gentle kind. They immediately become victims, martyrs, scapegoats. And when something goes wrong, the blame is never theirs. It's yours, always yours. And when you hurt, when you're overwhelmed, exhausted, breaking, they'll distort your pain, minimize it, or worse, make you believe it's your fault. The inversion of reality happens so subtly, so skillfully, that unless you are vigilant, you begin to question your own sanity. Pay attention. How often do you feel anxious around them? Do you find yourself constantly justifying your actions, apologizing for having feelings, rehearsing every word so you don't provoke another outburst? That is not normal. That is psychological violence. Even if there are no bruises, even if there are no screams. Another glaring red flag is the narcissist's dual nature. In public, charming, generous, flawless. In private, sarcastic, cruel, cold. They create this contrast on purpose so that when you finally cry for help, no one believes you. They have built a public mask so perfect that you look like the unstable one. It's a psychological trap. And tragically, it works. But seeing it is the first crack in their control. And now comes the most difficult, but also most powerful step, breaking free. And no, freedom doesn't always mean confrontation. It doesn't mean screaming back. It doesn't mean demanding justice. It means putting yourself first for the first time in a long time. It means cutting contact when you can, emotionally distancing yourself when you can't. It means stopping the hope that one day they will change, that they'll see what they did, that they'll say they're sorry, because they won't. Empathy to a narcissist is not a virtue, it's a threat. Admitting fault would shatter the very illusion they've spent years crafting. You don't need an apology to heal. You don't need their acknowledgement to be free. You don't need permission to reclaim your life. What you need is to return to yourself, to your voice, to your truth, to your worth. Carl Jung said, "What you deny submits you, but what you accept transforms you." So accept it. Not as blame, but as clarity. Yes, you were manipulated, you were deceived, you were harmed, but that pain was never your fault. The narcissist's behavior speaks volumes, not about you, but about the void inside them. And once you understand that, the spell begins to break. The guilt starts to dissolve. The fog starts to lift. And in its place, your voice. Your clarity, your center. If you've made it this far, know this. You are no longer a victim of illusion. You've already begun to come back to life. Awareness is the key, but courage Courage is the door. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever lived through something like this? Or do you know someone who desperately needs to hear this message? Tell your story in the comments, because your truth might be the lifeline someone else is waiting for. And if this video helped you in any way, like, share, subscribe. Not just as support, but as a declaration. I refuse to remain silent in the face of manipulation. And whatever you do, don't stop here. Watch the next video, because knowledge doesn't just heal, it protects. And you deserve to live safe. You deserve to live whole. You deserve to be free.